Meredith Stevens is joining us on the stage now. Meredith is Director of Digital Strategy for the National Cattlemen's Beef Association of America, which is a contractor to the beef checkoff. Meredith is going to tell us what stage of the measurement journey she's on. You're very welcome.
Thank you. So thank you, Barry. I want to talk about our measurement story, our journey. And you may or may not have realized when you all sat here in Barcelona thinking about and creating the Barcelona Principles, but beef and the Barcelona Principles have some things in common. And I want to share a little bit more about that. So when we first started our measurement story a few years ago, we traditionally and primarily had a lot of outputs. We had traditional metrics like media impressions. One of our largest objectives was to reach and to secure 1 billion media impressions. That's a billion with a B, which we did, but it still begged the question, so what? What does that mean? Why does that matter? So I was one of the lucky ones to get to work with Don Bartholomew. And he helped our team start a new foundation, a new definition for what measurement means for our programming. He helped through his guidance, through his willingness to teach us, helped us see why we need to help connect the dots, how we take the idea of measurement. Everybody agrees that measurement is good. You need it from a philosophical standpoint, but how do you do it? How do you implement it across your teams and across your programming and help those people come along with you on that journey? So he was one of the folks that helped to enlighten the inner measurement geek in me, which I didn't realize a few years ago was there, but it is strongly there now. He also showed us and introduced us to the Barcelona Principles. And as part of that, you may have not realized, how many were here in Barcelona when the principles were? Okay, so we have quite a few folks. You probably didn't realize that all the way from Barcelona, those principles would travel to America's farmers and ranchers. It has. The other thing that was a part of our foundation that Don helped to introduce us to was the measurement model for social media, which helped us not only just think about some of those engagement metrics when you think about social media, but it helped us think about it all the way from exposure to advocacy, the importance of those call to actions, the importance of recommendations, and what that means to us. We're an interesting kind of entity because we don't sell any particular kind of beef. We're for the education and promotion of all beef. So one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we could do, because sales data for us is not really an option, so we wanted to make sure that our measurement foundation was grounded in the Barcelona Principles, in outcomes, as well as helping to integrate and collaborate across our different teams. So our journey began, and it continues, and we learned a lot about how we're starting to collaborate and socialize this idea across our organization. So we had our own measurement summit a couple years ago, and we gathered all of our agency partners together, we gathered all of our team members together and those key stakeholders, and we realized that we were trying to be everything to everyone. And when you're talking about measurement, that really doesn't work. You have to really hone in on who are your target audiences. So one of the first exercises that we went through was defining those target audiences. Who's our core group that we could all, no matter if it was integrated communications department or the issues and reputation management team, who's our core audience? Who are we trying to reach? And so we were able to decide and realize that that core group for us is the older millennial parent. We also recognized that there were some other non-core but just as important audiences. Those are consumers. Those are also bloggers and health professionals. We have a tremendous amount of success reaching our key opinion leaders because we know we're not going to be able to get every single consumer to the right beef information. So how do we use our key opinion leaders to help us get that information in front of them? As well as retailers and food service professionals. Since we don't sell a particular type of beef, when consumers are buying beef, they're buying beef at a grocery store or they're buying it and ordering it at a restaurant. So we needed to make sure that we were also capturing that data, capturing that measurement across our business-to-business channel communications as well. And we have a lot of stakeholders as well that we needed to recognize. Farmers and ranchers contribute. It's how we get funding for our programming every year. So they're a very much invested partner in what we're doing. State beef councils. We work with 45 state beef councils in the US, and they all have different size staffs. They have different viewpoints on measurement. They have different abilities and strengths on how they're extending the programming from our national office. And as well as retail food service operators, again, they're also stakeholders. We help them think differently about how beef adds value to their business. We also wanted to make sure that data supported what really matters to those target audiences. Not as marketing professionals of what we think matters, but what the data shows us actually matters. So where we landed was needing to kind of have a rallying cry. And what we call it is a measurement Northstar. It's what we're able to say is our guiding light. Across our departments, across our teams, across our organization, we wanted one thing to help guide all of us, that if we're all doing one thing that helps to drive to our North Star, that it would help us also apply that from a measurement standpoint. For us, that North Star is that consumers agree that the positives of beef outweigh the negatives. Why? Because our data and market research tells us that if they actually believe, they have the perception that the positives outweigh the negatives, it increases their beef eating experience. It increases the beef eating actually frequency that they're purchasing beef. So we wanted to make sure that's as close as we could possibly get to sales data. It's more perceptual and attitudinal, but it's something that we also measure very consistently to ensure that we can help capture what that perception shift is, that attitudinal shift, and how that ultimately gets to frequency of purchase. The next kind of challenge that we came across was really understanding, now that we knew what those target audiences were, what is their experience with beef? So we have a really beautiful, I didn't draw it, but I definitely couldn't even do it this well, a stick figure in the middle that is representing the consumer target audience. It's the older millennial parent. And they start at the very left side, which is the consideration set. The age-old question, what or where do I want to eat? What's for dinner? What's for lunch? What's for breakfast? And they go through an evaluation part. And they think about, and what our research showed us is that for older millennial parents and for consumers overall in the US, they're thinking about kind of three different pillars. Is it easy? Is it going to be quick? Is it convenient for me? Is it simple? The second, is it nutritious? Is it healthy for myself and my family? And does it taste great? Because let's be honest, if it doesn't taste good, the odds of us eating it again, it's a tough sell. So we wanted to make sure that the consumer who was realizing that they had to sacrifice one or some of those in their evaluation phase. Because if it's quick, sometimes it's not the healthiest, but it tastes good, or vice versa. There's a lot of different evaluation sets that our consumer was going through. So we wanted to make sure that we could tap into that and make sure that beef is delivering on ease, taste, and nutrition. And then they go to the purchase decision. So what are they actually cooking? Where are they ordering their food? That's where our retailer and food service partners come into play, because that's where our consumer is going to actually get their beef. And when they're enjoying that meal eating experience, that post-purchase experience, if it's not delicious, they're not going to talk about it. They're not going to do it again. So we want to make sure that in that post-purchase environment, that they're having the best, most optimal eating experience possible. Because when they do, and beef delivers on that, they don't have to go to the consideration set anymore. They go into the loyalty loop. So after our team kind of understood the different phases that the consumer audience was going through, we could also start to plot out our different marketing and PR efforts that we have. And we use the paid, earned, shared, and owned ecosystem model. And that really helped kind of take down the barriers. Our teams are in different departments. They have different focuses. But one thing that really helped, I think, even the playing field, was throwing everything in the peso model. Because you don't worry about departments when you're looking at those different channels. You're looking at the greater whole. You see, we're not just talking about advertising, we're talking about all the paid tools. We're talking about search, we're talking about SEO, we're talking about banner ads. So having all those marketing tactics plotted out in the peso ecosystem model was extremely helpful for us and our team. And then deer in headlights from our team. So we've got all the marketing tactics plotted out, but you're telling me that we have to figure out how to measure it all And there's so many different ways to measure, and there's so many metrics that are out there. How are we supposed to do that, Meredith? What resources am I supposed to take? We needed to make sure that we struck the balance between having enough resources to actually conduct our work and having enough to evaluate if it's effective. So it was really about finding and kind of blending those two together. We have the measurement model at the top with exposure through advocacy. We have the PESO model, the paid, earned, shared, owned ecosystem on the left. And what you see is a tapered down version of the metrics that fall within each category. So as team members, when we're talking about measurement, we're not talking about every single metric that could possibly exist. We needed to hone in so that they could actually say, okay, if I work in our advertising team and I'm looking in the paid channel across the top row, where are the moments that we might have felt more comfortable around exposure, maybe engagement, but how are we getting to advocacy? And these metrics helped our team plot that out so that if they're not thinking in the advocacy or even in the impact column, they will be. And this is one of the biggest kind of charts that I carry around when we're talking measurement, because inevitably people start to feel overwhelmed about measurement. There were questions and talks about how you talk about measurement, how you get more team members involved. You need to have those champions that feel comfortable enough to talk about measurement, but also bring people on along with them. Because if measurement is in the silo, everything else is going to stay in the silo. It's not going to be effective. So for us, measurement was really this balance and this relationship between reach and engagement. Reach for us are those quantitative metrics. It's those metrics, you have to look at the subscribers. You need to know how many impressions or fans that you've got, of course. But if you don't also have engagement, which are those qualitative metrics, the comments, the shares, the click rates, then you're really not getting the full picture. Because if we have a ton of reach, but we have no engagement, that's not effective. If we have a huge amount of engagement, but it's to a handful of people, that's not working either. So we needed to figure out and strike that balance, not just with our own programming, but also with our metrics. It's one of the biggest things. I'm like a broken record with my team when we're talking measurable objectives. I keep telling them, okay, we need to have reach, but we also need to have engagement. And that is really easy for them to wrap their heads around, because you need the combination of the two to help us figure out that we are reaching the right audience at the right time with the right message. So what we then did is we took our ecosystem, we kind of broke it out to each of the channels, and then we assigned what would be those reach and engagement metrics for each part of our ecosystem. And that helped the team kind of see how the reach metrics and then the engagement metrics and then how they work together with each part of the ecosystem. So for our paid, it was these type of metrics. For our earned, our key opinion leader outreach, media relations, it was these type of metrics, because yes, impressions are important, but if you don't have the context with the engagement metrics, then you're missing the mark. We had shared, so our social media platforms, thinking about how we strike that balance with reach and engagement there. And then with our owned. For our website, our e-newsletter, the properties that we do own, we wanted to make sure that we were also keeping in mind reach and engagement for those pieces. Another interesting challenge that we came about was that not everybody, not just in our own team or department or organization, even other beef checkoff contractors, everybody is using some sort of different terminology or definitions. So when we kind of felt really good about a few years ago having these measurement summits, getting those definitions in place, we quickly realized that there were other people using different definitions and different terminology. So it was a pretty big, it's actually probably still one of those challenges that we're working on right now, how you socialize this work, how you socialize measurement, how you socialize how that applies to your programming is a huge part of the barrier as well. Because if measurement stays in that silo, if your team feels really good about measurement, but nobody else is on board, you're missing that communications gap, and you have to be able to connect the dots. So one of the things, and I really do believe that measurement is an art and a science. This is another formula that the Beef Checkoff has been working on. David Rockland actually helped to create this with our Beef Checkoff teams, and really thinking about efficiency, performance efficiency metrics. So this is one metric, one measurement tool in a whole world of measurement. So we had our teams reach and engagement metrics that help us to make sure that we're having optimal performance and making changes in real time to continuously improve ourselves and our programming. This is another metric that our programming will be applied to. What we're doing will be inputted into this formula. The background behind this is, and the thought behind this is that for every dollar that's spent for the checkoff spends $1, they'd like to know how many people are being reached with our messaging. And out of those people being reached, how many people are engaging with that content? So the top variable B, or industry voice amplification, are those key opinion leaders. Recognizing that those key opinion leaders have power. They have the ability to amplify our messages. For reach, thinking about reach to both core and non-core audiences. Both are important, maybe slightly differently weighted because of that, but still extremely important to have that reach, to have that number. For engagement, thinking about what they're doing after they're exposed with that message. Again, that balance between reach and engagement is really critical for us. And then the variable G is our message delivery adjustment, and that's basically based on our consumer demand drivers. There are certain messages that ring truer, that help consumers get over those barriers to beef purchases. So we wanted to make sure that that was weighted accordingly. So it might be things like food safety, product quality, nutrition and health, sustainability, some of those higher level strategic message delivery points. And then channel effectiveness adjustment, which is H, is the idea behind that channels, the way you're communicating, the conduit and how you're communicating those messages are weighted differently. So more active channels, and this is based on USFRA data, more active channels. I just realized we throw out a lot of acronyms in our organization. So the U.S. Farmers and Ranchers Alliance is what USFRA stands for. And so based on their data, they found that there's an adjustment, there's a weighting that happens between active and passive channels. So if I email somebody, if I email a key opinion leader, and I'm having it's very targeted, it's very personalized to them and to their needs, they're responding, we get that, that's a very engaged channel. If I'm speaking at a conference and people are just listening, or a key opinion leader is doing that, it's a more moderate channel. And then those lower, less active or more passive channels would be things like maybe TV ads. So the moral of the story is you have to have everybody come to the table. If everybody's not at the same table talking measurement, it's in a silo. It's really hard to adopt. It's really hard to collaborate. It's really hard to integrate across the organization if everybody is not on board, is not a part of the same conversations. So everybody has to come together and understand not just that measurement is important, but why is it important? What is it helping to do? And that was one of the biggest things that I think through this whole journey, and our journey, believe me, for measurement continues and will continue, and I hope it does, because there's always more to learn, there's always more to integrate with measurement on our teams. But in particular, thinking about what are the best metrics, what is that balance of reach and engagement, how are we focusing on outcomes and advocacy and getting to that final place of what really matters, as well as thinking about how is our team being better? How are we ensuring that our team is delivering the right message at the right time to the right audience? Thank you.
Thank you, Meredith. Now your mother knows what you do.
I know, my mom's here.
Welcome to Meredith's mum.
I'm a millennial.
Do we have a first question for Meredith? There's a lot of stuff in there, really interesting. You say you're on a journey.
Yes.
You've come a long way.
Oh, thank you.
So who would like to join and build this conversation? Question over there. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for the great presentation. A great strategic approach, really very impressive. My question concerns in your formula, do you integrate external factors like crises? For example, if there's a meat scandal, so can you make or put the formula in relation to external factors?
So, good question. One of the things that we realized in that formula in particular, and we're still working through, and I think is a significant part of our journey, is that issues and crisis management is a little bit different. What we're actually working on right now, so I don't have the exact answer. I have a yes, we're still on the journey. But what we're looking at is trying to get to that impact of negative press. And I was taking furious notes when Nick was presenting because I'm kind of curious about the economic model and how they were able to figure out the 80% obese related issues or contributions to the negative 6% in sales. Since we don't have sales numbers, what we try to look at is kind of the reputation side of things, the brand reputation, but also thinking about how a crisis, if you're dealing with a crisis and you're not in the news, how you measure not being in the news. And so that's one of the next biggest challenges that we're trying to tackle this year, because we've done some initial research and case studies and looking at what other companies have been doing, and there's not a whole lot out there, or people are keeping it secret. So that is actually a huge need for us, is to figure out, because our team, a huge part of our team with issues and reputation management is dealing with issues. But their work is incredibly significant, but we can't quite delineate the things that they're doing in that formula. So it's actually something that we're working on right now. And I hope that we can learn a little bit from this conference to also help us on that journey, because we're not quite sure. We don't know how you measure a non-impact. You know, you can look at neutral sentiment, you can look at negative sentiment, but you want a negative to neutral sentiment is a win for the issues team. They're not trying to get to positive, they're also trying to decrease the dialogue. So for them, the Northstar that I mentioned, they can still relate to consumers agreeing the positives of beef outweigh the negatives, but for them it's balance the dialogue so that consumers agree the positives outweigh the negatives. So we're still working on that.
Thank you. So we've got two more questions lined up. First one, please.
Hi, Marion McDonald from Ogilvy PR.
Hi.
I'm curious about why you say your North Star is sentiment related and not beef consumption. Having done some work with national rice organizations, for example, in Taiwan before, it was all about level of consumption, number of times per week rice is eaten, overall annual consumption level. Why do you not go that far into consumption levels?
So we definitely have numbers on consumption. We look at demand and consumption, and those are two very different things. But one of the things that we monitor on a consistent basis and know as there's a effect relationship is the perceptual. So we found it easier in our first phase to really get to that place where we have years and years of data that we check with our consumer market research team, and they were able to show us, and it's also, I'll say, one of the things that we also can ask when we're dealing with key opinion leader outreach. So for some of our other teams, consumption isn't gonna be as relevant to their programming because all of our programming relates to that, but it's a little bit harder for a program manager to wrap their head around what their one program is actually impacting consumption. It's almost too lofty at this point. So what we found is that going to the perceptional, the attitudinal shift, is also easier applied for program managers with regard to like events. We do immersion events with key opinion leaders. So every event we do with key opinion leaders, we can ask them, as a result of this immersion experience, do you recommend beef more? Do you feel that the positives outweigh the negatives? So it helps us kind of take it down into a little bit more of a digestible nugget of information and measurement. One day we probably will get to that place. There's so many variables that also retailers, food service operators, they all are working and doing ads and doing their own ecosystems that ultimately line up to consumption as well. So we needed take it down a little bit more.
Thank you. Can we give a microphone to Nick Hindle, please?
Thank you. I just wanted to comment on the point you were making about how do you measure the effectiveness of not being the story, and just to share what we do, because We've had a couple of recent examples, horse meat, the horse meat scandal that hit Europe and the UK was one, and tax has been another one, where they've both been issues that have affected our sector, but that we've not been a part of. We generally do two things. The first is that we poll customers, and we poll on intention to visit or intention to purchase. We find that a more accurate predictor of the effectiveness of our marketing and communications activity than actual purchasing, like you're doing. And the second one is that we look at the trading records and the financial reporting of the competitors, and we put that against our own performance during that time, our own sales data during that time. What you tend to find is if a big issue hits the industry, you're all affected in some way.
Yeah.
Luckily, we are less affected. You're less affected than others. And I think we benefit from the fact that we're a franchise organisation. We constantly have to explain ourselves to our franchisees, but that's what we do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great point.
Any build on that from?
I mean, that's what we found is that working with our industry partners, a lot of what we do is to help equip them with how they respond to some of those things, because it might impact our retailers more than our food service operators, depending on the issue. So we definitely have that counselor role, but it's just figuring out all those different components. So that's very insightful, though. Thank you.
So thank you, Meredith,
Yeah,
for
thank
being
you.
with us today. Thank you.